Okay, the first speaker today is Dr. Peter Taylor. His presentation is titled Research Update on the Airport Pavement Technology Program. Peter is the director of the National Concrete Pavement Technology Center at Iowa State University. He's involved in conducting projects and programs investigating materials related aspects of concrete pavements. He also spends time helping agencies and contractors implement best practices in concrete pavement design, construction, and maintenance. His research is focused on developing mixtures that are engineered to meet the requirements of the environment that they will be used in. He's a professional engineer registered in Illinois and an active member of a number of professional societies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Peter Taylor.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We get to talk about research that other people are doing. Yeah, trying to get under contract. All right. So this is a program that is getting out of the ground. It's called the Airport Concrete Pavement Technology Program, or FAA, that loves acronyms, calls it the ACPTP. And I've got to look it up every time I refer to it because I can't remember it, even though it's got all my initials in there. So this is good. Hey, Wordle. All right. It's basically a follow-on from the program that ACPA used to run, was the IPRF research program, and that sort of collapsed and was moribund for a while. But in more recent times, money has been written into the FAA bill, and we have a boatload of money to spend on research. The frustrating part is that as the contract manager, I don't get to do any of it, but I do get to earn some Mickey Mouse points by giving money to other researchers. So they're less likely to want to shoot me. So taken out of the documentation, the objective of the agreement, it's a cooperative agreement. FAA basically wrote us a big fat check without any competition, but it also means that any of the money that we give away has to be competitively bid. There's got to be a competition somewhere along the conversation. So the objectives: find out what's wrong, figure out how to fix it, and then get it done, get it in place. So it's fairly simple, fairly obvious, and quite a good set of objectives. The structure is gloriously confusing. The top of the food chain is the FAA, coming through the research center in New Jersey. And that's the contract the FAA has with me at the CP Tech Center. Providing me with guidance, covering me, is the so-called Program Coordination Group. This is a group of about 10 national experts on all things airfields. It includes people from the Airport Owners Association, Boeing, FAA. It's all the high-end people, which makes organizing meetings really entertaining, because trying to get onto their calendars and trying to get 10 people onto the same calendar spot proves to be challenging, especially when they don't respond to doodles. We figured out who's the bad people, and we just ignore them, set the meeting, and they happen to show up most of the time. So that's working pretty well, but it is fairly slow. On the other box on the right-hand side up at the top here is feedback coming from ACPA, is Gary Mitchell. So he has been very closely related to, and he and I spend a lot of time sort of driving this program, the nuts and bolts, the planning. He does not have a vote in any of the conversations that we have, but if any of you know Gary, he has a very loud voice. And a fairly strong impact on what this program is doing. On the other side of the house is Harold Honey at FHWA. And like Gary, he doesn't have a vote, but basically we're running everything past him to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with where FHWA is going and their needs are being met. And I'll talk to you about how Harold interfered in one of our more recent projects towards the end of this presentation. Underneath me is a number of contracts that we are negotiating or will be negotiating with the research community. So I've got project 1, 2, 3. We're actually pushing 5, probably going to be another 4 or 5 as time goes on. At the moment, the total funding is $6.5 million. I heard recently there's another $3 million out there. So that in the most recent bill, we haven't seen it yet, but that's not a trivial amount of money that we're going to be handling over the next few years. Feeding into the relationship is, again, FAA acronym, Project Technical Panel, the Technical Advisory Committee. This is the group that actually makes the decision. So the PCG gets together and decides, what do we need? What are the broad strokes of the topics that we have to work on? And we got together probably 18 months ago, did a whole couple of hours of brainstorming, arguing, arm wrestling. And at the end of the day, we did some voting and we prioritized the first 8 topics. And we've been working down that list. So then once we get to working on a given topic, the technical panel is the people that decide the details. What's going to be done? What's it look like? How much money do we want to throw at it? They get to review we then write the RFP and they rubber stamp that at the end of the day. The RFP goes out, all the researchers write their best language, get it back to us. And again, it's the technical panel that meets and makes a decision on which team they actually like. And so I'm entirely protected. If anybody whines at me, it's not my fault, it's them. And then the contractor, the team that's actually doing the work. And I'll talk about each of the projects as we go along, but the program will be set up a contract with the university and demand quarterly reports. Most of the projects, we've got a 6-month stop in it for them to figure out the final details of the work plan, make sure it's headed in the right direction. And most of them are so far been running 2 to 3 years length. So let's look at, okay, I'm repeating myself. The role of the coordination group, find out what we need, help prioritize them, and give us some guidance on, the limits of each of the projects that we want to look at. They also get copied on all of the correspondence. So if there's something that they really don't like, they're in a position to call foul, stop, change direction, whatever is happening. Here's the list of the people that are on the PCG. I'm not going to read them all to you, but if you want any more details from this, I'm going to keep moving. I'm assuming you can read 9 names in the time I've been rambling. All right, so the first project was on alkali silica reaction. The background is that in the Airfields community, ASR is a fairly significant issue because they're absolutely terrified of FOD. It was a pretty big issue. FAA wrote some interesting specifications, including screwing up C1260, and they've got their own set of rules. And some of it, we hear a lot from the aggregates industry. We also hear from the contractors. Things like, in the middle of Iowa, the only rock we can get is a really good limestone. There is no silica in it. It is not going to be alkali silica reactive. And yet, every airfield contract in the middle of Iowa still has to go through the whole rigmarole of C1260, all of the approvals and testing. And it gets to be expensive without any real benefit because we already know it's good rock. Carry on. And so we're getting quite a lot of that feedback. And they're starting to listen to say, okay, is there a better way to do ASR evaluation? The other real challenge with ASR is there's the quick test, takes 14 days, although under FAA it takes 28 days, right? At best, it's about 50% reliable. All right, so that means half of your chairs that you're sitting on are going to break. Who's comfortable? All right, so yeah, sure, no, maybe not. So then we go to the more reliable test, takes 2 years. And the even more reliable test with the big blocks takes 5 years. So think about the contract of that one. Contract's awarded, contractor goes off, spends 5 years testing his aggregates, comes back after 5 years and says, am I good to go? You know, it's like writing ACI specifications. You know, we were in the 130 document this morning on materials that we actually wrote it 5 years ago. It's already redundant and it's only just been published. So yeah, that sort of thing where time is of the essence. We've got to find a better way to do this. Class F fly ash has been a real boon in protecting us from ASR, but it's getting harder to find. Is there a better way? Test protocols are not ideal. So we put out an RFP asking them to look at two different things. And it was actually one of the questions that came up, which is more important, better test methods or better materials to prevent the issue? And there's no good answer to that question because you can come to me with the perfect material, but unless you've got a good test method to convince me that it is good, I'm not going to believe you. It's not that I don't trust you, but I'm a control freak. All right? So we need both. And so that's been the outline of the work. And again, as I've already outlined, some of the test methods are less than ideal. So we put out an RFP. We got 10 proposals back. We called 3 of the teams into a meeting in Chicago, had a merry morning, giving each team 20 minutes to present their story, 40 minutes of being grilled, and then an entertaining lunch break with the whole TAC meeting, arm wrestling, and bickering about their favorites. And in the end, the vote went to Oregon State. And we're really looking forward to the work coming out of there. The contract has been signed. It's for a period of 39 months. Watch this space. We will be putting quarterly reports up on our website as time goes on. But yeah, that one was the first one. It was quite a heavy lift to get there. So then we went to performance engineered mixtures for airfields. Once again, the whole PEM program that we established for highways has been reasonably successful. We have persuaded states to change their specifications, to revisit the way they do things. Instead of copying and pasting last year's specification for the wrong materials, let's write specs based around what do you need, how am I going to measure it, and how do I make a mixture that's going to get there? And we asked, again, the teams to follow the same thought process wearing an FAA hat. One big thing that we heard from the community is that mixture proportioning, a system that works really well for highways, 8 inches thick, doesn't work for 20 inches worth of pavement. The edge slump requirements, the segregation issues, the mortar layer on the top surface gets to be a little different. So we wanted the team to revisit those. So again, we asked them to consider the same thought processes as PEM for highways. What do you want? How do you test it? And can you give us proportioning tools and help write a better specification in FAA language? So we received 9 proposals this time, went through the same process. We hauled in and interviewed 4 teams. Spent an even longer day listening to people, and the contract went to Oklahoma State. And Tyler is sitting there looking a little excited about it. Yeah, again, this one should be fascinating to keep an eye on. That contract, Tyler's been signed. It's okay. So where's my quarterly report? I don't work for you. Next topic was rapid repair and rehabilitation. This was an intriguing one because now it starts getting out of my comfort zone. I'm a materials geek and I've got to start being quiet. But again, the last guide published was under the IIPRF program, I think in 2002. The critical part being small airports with 1 runway. How long can you shut it down while you repair it? Small airports with 2 runways that cross. What do you do at that meeting point? Big airports with a lot of airplanes coming in and out, they still don't have a lot of redundancy. And so, part of the question was not only how do we do repairs and rehabilitation fast, but when do we decide to do it fast? And that was one of the key questions that the panel was really intrigued with, was the thought of, are we pushing for rapid just because we can, or because there's a real need? And how do we build that into 501 specifications, or do we write a whole new one? So that's the challenge that has been issued to those teams. We put the RFP out, and again, ask them to look at, when is it going to be bad? And not only is it just the concrete, it's the whole system, the surface, the foundation layers, all of it. How far down do you have to dig when you're doing a repair, and why? And is it really worth it? And what construction practices are you going to be using as you chew through this? 6 proposals were received. We interviewed 2 teams in Atlanta and decided we much prefer going to Chicago than Atlanta, even though it's warmer. And the contract was awarded to ARA. That's also either being negotiated in the final details or has been signed. So they're under contract right at the moment. 4th one, quality control and quality acceptance. Again, there's an old AC out there, and a lot of it is still ambiguous, potentially able to get wrong, not well understood. And there are still plenty of sources of dispute, which is what keeps Gary Mitchell crazy busy. He wants to retire, so he wants the problems to go away. So we've got to fix the language so that these sort of things stop happening. And also to provide some guidance on QC plans. That RFP was issued a few months ago. And again, looking at what are the critical parameters? How do you institute quality control? How do you separate QA and QC? Because again, FAA language is not the same as FHWA language, so we've got to reconcile our differences in terminology and differences. And at the end of the day, develop an implementation guidance. And the teams were recommended to have a good look at a document that the center recently published, and the author of that is sitting in the middle of the room, Tara Cavallini, along with Al Ennis and Gary Fick. Strongly recommend anybody who's involved in quality, come and get a copy of this thing. It's a freebie on our website. Mike Prohl, who was the primary client for this document, reckons he can retire happy now because this thing has finally been published. So that RFP went out. We received 5 submittals. 3 of them have been chosen for interview. One of the teams has been informed. I just tried to make phone calls to the other 2 teams and they didn't answer their phones. So I'm not going to mention any names yet. But once again, we're going to be doing the 3 groups of people coming into Chicago and being grilled. Hey, Tyler, was it fun? No, babe. And so, again, hopefully we can get that meeting together sometime in June and get a contract out fairly quickly. All right, the next one, rubber removal. Every time a plane lands, it leaves a little bit of tire on the ground. And at the end, the interesting part I learned at the TAC meeting was that the temperatures start to melt that rubber, and it changes its nature, and it sticks pretty well and becomes very slick. So for safety, it has to be removed pretty regularly. And on really crazy busy runways, it's every 2 to 3 months. The preferred solution to doing that rubber removal is hydraulic water pressure. The catch being that you can also take off the top surface of the concrete when you do the hydraulic spraying. And so the questions that the RFP is going to include are things like, how often do you actually have to do it? And how do you know when you need to do it? Is it a clock-based thing? Every 3 months on the first of the month, whether you've had aircraft coming down or not? Is it different for different airports? If you're going to do it, how do you know when you've done enough? Because you don't need to get back to the grade. You've just got to get most of the rubber off. Define most. And how do you measure it? Because again, all of this has to be in a language and a system that the FAA can put numbers onto it. And even though it's not part of the construction process, it is a part of the maintenance process for Airfield. So it's not going to be under 501. It's going to have some other designation. And then if you are going to be doing some sort of process, how much damage is acceptable? How many times can you re-blow a pavement before you have to go back in there and repair the pavement? How much damage is acceptable? And this has all been bickered about. We've written the RFP and we sent it into the panel for the final review. And this is where Harold Honey threw a wrench in the spokes and said, by the way, I want this to be for asphalt as well. And all the concrete people are going, hell no. But FAA's position is a runway's a runway. We need the guidance. So we're busy regrouping, figuring out how do we get the asphalt community engaged in this. We will be tweaking the RFP before we issue it. Hopefully it'll be another couple of weeks. I'm talking to the guys who've got the parallel program running on the asphalt side, Richard Willis, kind of hoping that we don't have to change the system a whole hell of a lot if we just get a couple of their people on the panel. And we've got some other projects where we're going to be teaming up in terms of asphalt and concrete. And my suggestion is going to be, they pay for one of these, we'll pay for this one, rather than trying to transfer money between the two different programs, because that's just going to be a nightmare. So the RFP has been written until Harold messed it up. And so as a punishment for him, he's now rewriting it to include asphalt on it. I haven't got it back from him yet. But again, this will be coming out in the not too distant future. Coming up, other topics that we're going to be looking at. These were the remaining topics in the first round of voting. When do you diamond grind? How much? How do you know it's good? How do you know it's necessary? The other one that's suddenly become important is as limestone cements become the de facto material available, where, type 1 or type 2 cements are no longer available, it's all PLC. The highway community seems to have adopted them pretty, yeah, sure, fine, carry on. The architectural community, less so. The FAA community, hell no. And so we're going to have to do at least a literature review to take back to FAA to say, yeah, it's okay. You can sleep tonight. We'll be all right. Next topic, panel size selection. We're using 15-foot panels right at the moment. Is that the right number? And then finally, as smoothness is getting to be more and more important, what do we do in terms of start-stop practices and guidance on maintaining smoothness under ordinary construction process? So lots more to come. And that's just, Gary and I have another 5 or 6 items we haven't brought to the PCG yet, but so I won't talk about those. But there's a lot of money still out there. We're going to be issuing these things we're hoping once a month over the next few months. So for those of you in the research community, have fun. I'm kind of jealous. What's really encouraging is that of the 4 RFPs we've put out, more than 6, all of the groups that have put in bids have been teams. And we counted up the individual members. We've had more than 60 different entities submit proposals. People are hungry. They're looking for this research work. So the challenge for me is staying on top of it all. I'm running the first 4. I'm delegating the next few to John Adam. He's going to be the front face of the conversation on those ones. Everything that I just said is available on our website. If you go to the cptechcenter.org and click under the resources, there's a FAA tab, and all the information about the current and upcoming projects is there.